Episode 166 is here, everybody, with Nicole Guberman, a women's coach who helps people overcome narcissistic abuse, codependency, etc. She works with predominantly women who have suffered from being in a relationship with a narcissistic person, a person that suffers from NPD, otherwise known as Narcissistic Personality Disorder. And she came on to talk all things about the characteristics, the traits, the signs, symptoms, and ways to improve and recover from that type of behavior. So check her out. We've linked her in the show notes. As always, everybody, please subscribe or follow. I think we're done with calling this subscriptions. We're done with calling podcasting by using the word subscribe. Apple Podcast is now calling it follow, like most of the other apps are, because the subscription word implied that there would be some kind of payment required. So there's no payment required when it comes to listening to this podcast. And please continue to follow, like, comment, share, rate, and review, especially on Apple Podcasts. Much appreciated, everybody. With that said, phenomenal conversation, very insightful, and really appreciate her time today. Please welcome the one and only Nicole Guberman.
The Optimal Life.
Nicole, welcome. How are you today?
Doing great. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. This is an exciting one for me because I am really intrigued by human behavior, human dynamics, personality types. And one of the most unique personality types are narcissists. And that's something that you specialize in, which I'm really looking forward to getting into the details with you. But first off, let's start with this. Define narcissist for the audience.
Sure. Yeah. Narcissism. It's quite the topic. I think it's pervasive in our society, and it's important to know what you're dealing with when it comes to a narcissist. And narcissism, it exists on a spectrum. So, we all have a healthy amount of narcissism that allows us to function and stay alive. But then there's, things like toxic narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder. That's, a personality disorder. And someone who has this will likely exhibit at least 5 of certain kinds of traits, like they have a grandiose sense of self-importance. They have a preoccupation with, fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, this idea of ideal love, a belief that he or she is special, that they should only associate with other special or high status people or places. They are constantly seeking excessive admiration. They've got this sense of entitlement, that they have these unrealistic expectations, or expect a certain kind of treatment or a certain kind of compliance with their expectations. They're interpersonally manipulative. They take advantage of others to achieve their own ends. They often lack a sense of empathy, and they're unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. And they're often envious of other people. And then along with that, they have the belief that others are envious of them. And they have a tendency to be arrogant and show those kinds of behaviors and attitudes towards others.
So those are a lot of the signs of a narcissist. But in terms, and we'll unpack a lot of that because those are all I want to get into the details. But in layman's terms, okay, those are characteristics that many narcissists possess. But if somebody came up to you and said, Nicole, just in generally speaking, what do you believe? How do you define narcissist in 1 or 2 sentences?
Sure. That's interesting because I think everyone has their own interpretation of what narcissism is based upon their own upbringing and their conditioning and their own belief system. So, that's a great question. What I just described comes directly from something called the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And that's typically what a psychiatrist or psychologist or a therapist would use. And that is something I really don't deal with because I am not a licensed therapist. So my definition of narcissism is anyone who you're interacting with who is just not hearing you. They're not hearing you. They're not, honoring your needs. They are totally obsessed with themselves, and they're living their life without regard for other people. And ultimately, this leaves a person feeling bad about themselves. And that's an awful place to be when you're on the other end of that.
So they're living life without regard for others. Let's talk about that. When somebody falls in love with somebody else, and they might think that this person on the other side is the most amazing person in the world. He or she showers me with gifts, with attention, with love, with fulfilling these fantasies or whatever it is. And everything seems fantastic at the beginning. But so why is it that these people who lack such regard for others have such a ease of success in getting people to fall in love with them at the beginning?
Yeah, so what you're describing is something called love bombing, where when you're first interacting with someone like who has this kind of behavior, who operates from this place, they're love bombing you. They're giving you all of this admiration, this attention, this praise, so that they suck you in. And that's manipulative, and they're doing that to really, they're doing that because they're looking for supply for their own ego, supply to make themselves feel better, and they are sucking that out of the other person. And so the person on the other side, the person who's not the narcissist, they don't know, unless they know what love bombing is, they don't know that they're being love bombed. They're just, wow, this person's giving me all this attention. Wow, this person's really into me. It's something, I haven't experienced this before. And so it can be very enticing. It hits you. And then you don't know what happened until you're realizing, oh my God, this person just love bombed me, and putting together the pieces way after the fact.
Is the narcissist love bombing intentionally? Are they doing it with an intent to get that person to fall in love? Or are they not? Is a narcissist who's so deeply programmed into this narcissistic world not even cognizant that they're doing this to the other person?
That's a good question. Some might be doing it intentionally, and some are, they're unaware that it's going on. They just do it because they're building up their ego, and because underneath that there's this intensely fragile sense of self, and they're trying to build themselves up because of that vulnerability that they're unwilling to show anyone. A narcissist really is not going to show their vulnerability, but only behind closed doors with themselves. They won't take that mask off. And so when they're love bombing, that's for their own gain. And they could be aware of that or not. It really depends on the level of severity.
So you're saying that the reason that a narcissist acts out in many of these different ways that you probably already described at the beginning is for their own sense of self. It's for their own feeding the ego. They're so insecure deep down that these are ways to make themselves feel better. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
It is.
It's a way to inflate their own ego. They have this false identity that they're projecting to the world, and that's the opposite of being authentic. They don't even realize that that's who they are. They've been brought up. People often wonder, like, what causes narcissism? And that's very complex. They've been conditioned from their, young life that if people are giving them information like, you're incredible, you're amazing, you're perfect, all this stuff, they're going to grow up with that kind of belief system, like, I'm this amazing person, and then expect that kind of treatment from others, or there's some kind of trauma going on in their early life, and that is causing them to behave a certain way later on.
trauma that goes on in childhood. Give an example, something traumatic that happens to them throughout their childhood that they don't address as they grow into their adult lives, and then it manifests into this form of a personality disorder.
Yes, exactly. And so some people, depending upon what those experiences are, like maybe that they had a very controlling parent, or maybe there was some kind of abuse going on, emotional or physical, a certain kind of scenario where they were beaten down emotionally and then developed this kind of behavior as a means to work through those issues. But it's a very complex issue because the situations are different. Every person's upbringing it has a different kind of flavor, and so that's a hard question to answer.
It is, and it's not all nature and it's not all nurture. It could be a combination of both. Clearly,
correct.
The research does show that
they have difficulty regulating their emotions, and they're going to seek this kind of admiration. They're going to seek these relationships, but it's very superficial. It's superficial for them. They don't really understand vulnerable and authentic interaction. And so, yes, they're going to believe I have all these friends and but that is superficial. And, a narcissist, a truly, narcissistic person, either that has NPD or is going toward it, they really aren't interested in changing. They're not going to go and seek professional help because they don't really understand what the problem is. They can't understand the other point of view. They're unwilling to.
Yes.
And so there are people who realize, I have some narcissistic tendencies. Let me go address that. That level of narcissism is much different than what you're describing. Yeah.
Right. So the person with the severe the disorder itself, the issue is that they don't understand that they have the disorder. They don't want to believe that their perspective is anything but flawless, and it prevents them from ever even thinking there's nothing for me to change. Right? I mean, why does anyone want me to change? I'm perfect.
Right. Exactly. And so when they're telling people, what are you talking about? That's crazy, or you're crazy. That's called gaslighting, where they're causing doubt in the other person, and the other person ends up feeling like, am I crazy for thinking this? Am I crazy for having these feelings? No, you're having legitimate feelings. And, the gaslighter is just, that's how they deflect someone who is trying to assert boundaries and assert their feelings, because we have the right to express ourselves. We have the right to express our feelings and our thoughts. And if someone's unwilling to even listen to us, not worth being with that person, not worth putting our energy into that relationship.
I would imagine that that's a very common thing that you're dealing with in coaching your clients, is that they're coming to you with this frustration, and I want to get into this, about potentially their partner, and then they're saying to you, Nicole, you probably hear this all the time, Nicole, am I crazy? Like I'm feeling guilty, like maybe I made too big of an issue, and I'm the loony one.
Well, that's common, and when a person has been interacting with a narcissist, they start to develop these symptoms of always talking about them. He did this and she did this and this happened and blah, blah, blah. And it becomes about the story of what they did, and everything has to do with them. And that, am I crazy? Am I, what's going on? What's happening here? Them. It's about them. They are in a place of self-denial. They're not truly honoring themselves. And so that self-denial is a huge issue, huge problem. And so is a person who's dealing with a narcissist, are they more interested in staying stuck in that story? Or are they interested in getting out of it and solving the problem? And I think that is super important, because there is this preoccupation with understanding what narcissism is and understanding how to identify it. When it comes down to it, if you're feeling bad about yourself, if you're feeling that something's wrong, yes, you have to understand what the problem is, but it's not going to solve the problem by researching narcissism and reading articles and studying the traits. I mean, I did that because I wanted to know what was going on. Well, what is this, and how did I get involved, and why, and how could I have done it differently? But the more you research narcissism, the more you invest in understanding who they are and what they do, you're keeping yourself in the story. On a very basic level, you're keeping yourself in that story. And how is that serving you to stay in that story?
Right.
To stay in that kind of drama. Some people have an investment in this kind of suffering or this kind of crazy making. If I stick to the story and I get so embroiled in this story, then I'm going to get attention and I'm going to be heard in some way. But how does that help you? What does it do for you?
Right.
And you have to make the delineation of what would I rather be doing than focusing so intensely on this narcissist. What do I need to do in my life to get to where I want to go, and what do I need, and what's important about me, and those things. And that is crucial, because when you're dealing with a narcissist, you've essentially been in self-denial. What some people call, some therapists out there call it self-love deficiency disorder. I like to see it particularly as self-denial, point blank, because you've stopped focusing on yourself. It becomes all about the other person.
There's a lot there. So give us an example.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. There's so many different ways to go with this thing. So give us an example.
Exactly.
Give us a common example of just a gaslighting situation for somebody that's listening that goes, maybe they've never even thought about it. And they're going, oh, wow, I want to think about that a little bit more with my partner, my boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever. What's a common example of that?
All right. Well, that's a great question, and it manifests in different ways. Often a narcissist has some kind of addiction, whether it's sex addiction, maybe they drink a lot, or they're really obsessed with their work, and you find yourself saying, why are you doing that? You're not paying attention to me, or you're so obsessed with that, and I'm here feeling alone. And the narcissist will say, what are you talking about? What's wrong with you? Why are you so needy? Why are you feeling like that? Of course I love you. They're totally disregarding the other person's feelings. Does that make sense? That example?
It does. It does. So you're
yeah.
So you're the. Let's play it out. I come home, long day at the office. Yet another long day at the office. Right? Another long day at the office. Go ahead. You say to me what a typical person that's on the other side of the narcissist would say.
They would say, sorry, somebody just knocked on my door, but I can't answer that.
Come on, knock on my door. Remember that show, Three's Company?
So on the other side,
you remember that show?
On the other side of the narcissist. So, hi, honey, how you doing? I want to tell you all about my day. When's a good time? And the narcissist would say, oh, I don't want to talk to you right now. I don't want to hear that.
I had a long day.
And just...
Right.
I had a long day,
I've had meetings, leave me alone.
Me, it's all about me. This happened, and they may launch into a story of, oh my God, this happened, and they just disregard the other person completely, instead of saying, oh, hi, honey, I had a long day. I need a couple of minutes to decompress, but let's talk about it in an hour. Let me decompress, and I want to hear about your day, and those kinds of things where they're showing regard for the other person. They're showing love. They're saying, these are my needs, and I want to hear what you have to say, rather than just totally disregarding them.
Right, but then you as the victim, we'll call it, the non-narcissist, back to the original example, says, you come home all the time. Every time I want to share something with you, you're not emotionally there for me. You're always talking about yourself. This is what you're starting to say because you're getting frustrated. And then here I am, the narcissist, and I'm going, the gaslighting part is where I then somehow find a way to shift and turn your comments back onto you, right? That's the gaslighting piece of it. And I start making you feel like the crazy person because I'm saying to you, what are you talking about? Why are you always so emotional? You go look at yourself in the mirror. Why do you need my approval for everything? There's ways I could spin it back on you. And then you, as the victim, is sitting there, just got gaslighted. You have no idea what the heck just happened. And you go to bed that night thinking to yourself, am I the crazy one?
What's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. You've been programmed to believe something bad about yourself. When you start to feel bad about yourself based upon somebody else's behavior, that is a big problem. When you're in an intimate relationship with someone, you're not supposed to be feeling bad about yourself. You're supposed to be feeling good about yourself. The person that you're in an intimate relationship with is meant to show love and support. They're there to lift you up. They're not going to solve all your problems, and you need to love yourself first. But the point of being in a relationship is to experience love and intimacy and connection. So if you're not experiencing those things, you're actually associating love with pain. And that's the crux of the issue here, that when you start to feel that love is painful, that's a major problem, and that's something that needs to be totally rewired.
So your clients come to you. Obviously, every situation is different. My first question about the advice and counsel that you're giving, you work strictly with females?
In general, yes.
Okay.
That's
Do
correct.
you believe that there's more narcissistic men than women, or does it not matter based on gender?
That's a great question. I don't have an answer for that. But
Okay.
In general, perhaps, there are men who have dealt with narcissistic women. That is definitely an issue too. But because I am female and I've gone through the experience through my own life, I have a deep sense of purpose in helping women
Sure.
really overcome that subconscious programming that's become conditioned because I went through it myself.
Gotcha. So somebody comes to you, they give you all the information. You obviously clearly know that they're dealing with narcissistic abuse. Is there an option at the beginning for your client to then go back to her partner and say, hey, we have to sit down and talk about this. I love you, but I think that you've got to, can they come out directly and say, I think you have a personality disorder? Or would that just send shockwaves through the relationship?
That's a great question. It really depends on the certain situation. I think if you're going to go flat out and say it to a narcissist, they're going to deny it or throw it back on you, saying you're crazy, things like that. If they are willing to hear it, that's going to be quite interesting. You have to decide what's the gain of doing that. What are you going to gain from saying that to the narcissist? Or what are you going to lose by saying that? Is it going to make your life more difficult by bringing it up? Or is it going to spark a conversation where they're going to be willing to listen to you? So you have to know you got to know your partner's responses in general and see and kind of predict what's going to happen.
Which path do you typically lead your clients on?
That's a tricky question because every situation is different. Personally, I would say, rather than trying to force something on someone else and try to control somebody else and say, this is your problem, I would focus on the client and say, what do you need to do to feel better about yourself and about your needs and your future? So I would say, is it worth it?
Is the relationship worth it?
Is the relationship worth it? And is it worth it to bring that up to them? You have to decide, what are you getting out of the relationship? What is it actually doing for you? Is it meeting your needs? Are you surviving in this, or are you actually thriving? Are you soaring? You have to really understand where you have now landed. How bad is it? How bad of a problem is it?
I guess what I'm trying to understand, because it's such a complex issue, is if somebody finds himself in a relationship with somebody that possesses many of these narcissistic traits, is there a chance to salvage the relationship? Is there you mentioned earlier, the problem that many narcissistic people have is they don't even know that they have these issues, and they don't want to even admit that they have these issues. So is there a way to salvage this type of behavior? And can the narcissist, I guess, kind of somehow turn things around and become a better partner over the course of time with therapy, with coaching, those kind of things?
It's a great question. It really depends on the willingness of the narcissist, and generally they're not going to want to go to therapy. And even if they do go to therapy, they're going to be very resistant, and they're going to be stubborn and put up a wall and not want to do the work. And that ends up being like pulling teeth for the other person, because on some level they want to, salvage the relationship, the narcissist, I mean, but it's not really genuine. It doesn't come from a place of authenticity. When you go to therapy as a couple, you are both invested in the healthy development of the relationship, the future of the relationship. And if a narcissist is unwilling to do that, then you're not really going to get anywhere.
Right.
Does that make sense?
You need a willing and able dance partner. Absolutely.
Right. It takes two, right?
It
takes two.
Yeah.
And, a narcissist is all about me, all about number one.
Talk to us a little bit about your, whatever you're willing to share, if you would. Talk us a little bit about what you went through and your experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for asking. So my experiences have been quite interesting. And I think part of it has to do with me growing up in the arts, in the field of classical music and opera, and the field in general has a lot of narcissists. I say that very neutrally, that it's just part of the business. Everyone is self-involved, and it's all about everyone's individual instrument. And look at me on stage. There has to be a certain amount of healthy narcissism within a narcissist. No, I just misspoke. There has to be a certain amount of healthy narcissism within an artist.
Yes.
And so,
well, because
as an artist, you have to learn how to reconcile those narcissistic elements with the authenticity of expressing emotion and knowing yourself on a deep level. And that's something that I had to learn how to reconcile and manage and really develop. That yes, it is all about you when you're the artist, but it's also about the audience and about what you're sharing and what you're contributing to society through music. And so basically, by being in a field where it's very self-involved, as you train for years and years and years, and you subject yourself to the feedback and the criticism and the judgment of people, casting directors, of coaches and things like that, teachers who are always giving you feedback, you have to decide, what do I want to take in that's actually going to do something for me, and what do I want to filter out? And when you're a young person learning about your voice and learning about your instrument and honing it and doing all that work, your brain is also still developing. Mm. So when you're getting feedback that could be considered critical or judgmental or whatever, you have to understand that, well, what's my bubble? What's my sense of self? And I had to learn that. I really had to learn that. And, I went through a very interesting process of saying to myself, what do I really think? What do I really need? What really is my voice? And not giving my power away to other people. And that's what I teach my clients to do, to not give their power away.
But was there somebody in your life particularly that was trying to take that power?
I don't know if it was intentional, but it comes from their own behaviors and belief systems. You know, I worked with certain coaches and teachers who were like that. I, you know, had been in relationships with other musicians who were like that. You know, so those kinds of experiences, I had gotten to the point where I no longer wanted to suffer in those kinds of relationships. And that it didn't feel good to be criticized, or it didn't feel good to, you know, to be minimized. That someone would be willing to put up with that, and someone might not. And
Right.
I got to the point where I didn't want to be in relationships where I felt that I wasn't being heard.
Yes.
And it's interesting. It's fascinating because you have to learn how to use your voice as an opera singer. You know, you have to learn the intricacies of the vocal function and expressing yourself artistically, the artistry behind what you do. And so to me, it all kind of, it's full circle that I worked through my own personal issues through growing my voice. And that's what I love to help other women do.
Yeah, that's very interesting and beautifully said. What's tricky about the whole thing is, again, you can't. It's walking a tightrope here, because, you know, no relationship's perfect. Obviously, there's going to be times in a relationship, in a completely healthy relationship, where there's disagreement, or the other person says something that maybe they shouldn't say. They make the other person feel bad. That doesn't necessarily mean you're living in a narcissistic, abusive relationship, right? I mean, there's. I would imagine it's just got to be somehow when those activities are the daily, when those are the norm versus the abnorm, then you may be looking at something like narcissism, right? Because every relationship's going to have their ups and downs, lefts and rights.
Right, exactly. So, you know, it's a great point. There's going to be conflict in any relationship, no matter what. It's a part of life.
Yes.
And we have to learn how to manage those conflicts rationally and manage our feelings and know and learn how to communicate with others so that we have clear boundaries, that we are speaking our truth, we're asserting ourselves, and we're not going to get all of our needs met by everyone. That certain people are going to have you know, they're going to fulfill a purpose for you in your life. You know, you're not going to get everything from one person, and you really shouldn't. You know, that when you're in a relationship, you have to be able to love yourself first. You know, to be able to love another person, and you know, to have the expectation that a partner is going to meet every need, I think is unrealistic. Yeah,
I 100% agree. So before we finish off, some tips, some pieces of advice. Obviously, this is what you do. You help women overcome prior narcissistic, abusive situations, codependency, those types of things. So talk us through it. If there's a woman out there that's listening right now that's struggling with this, what are some tips and advice that you'd give to her?
Absolutely. So I do want to make the distinction that, you know, my approach is alternative, and it's rapid transformational work. So what I do is very different from spending years in therapy working on these issues. I have massive respect and admiration for the field of psychotherapy, as it, you know, my family is in that field. And so, you know, it's always important to have a therapist in your life. But if a woman wants to work with me, they're ready for change. They want to experience rapid growth. They are sick of settling with what they've been dealing with. They no longer want to suffer, and they're ready to have an absolutely amazing life, whether it is, you know, having their dream relationship, you know, becoming more successful professionally and really becoming financially free, or simply having a deeper sense of self in their purpose, and the way they carry themselves, and the way they speak, and the way they interact with others. If they really want to become their truly authentic self, then absolutely get in touch with me. You know, my work is not essentially, it's not trauma-based, it's strengths-based. So I'm not going to focus on what's wrong. I'm going to focus on what you want, what your outcome is, where you want to go, and how to get there. And that largely has to do with identity, how you view yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you see yourself, how you hear yourself, and the kinds of thoughts and beliefs and feelings you have that are running the show. That's what I help women to reprogram through modalities such as NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, which is basically the study of success, or what many call the lost user manual of the mind, or how we use language to create our reality and go after what we want. It could also be construed as hypnosis with the eyes open. So NLP and hypnosis are very interrelated. And that's the kind of rapid transformational work that I do, which is quite different from psychotherapy, which generally focuses on work from a conscious standpoint rather than working with the unconscious or the subconscious.
That's it? No, I'm just kidding.
Is your brain on fire?
Yeah, it really is, because it's just such an interesting topic. Again, human psychology and human behavior is something that I'm very, very interested in, and I'm always learning about. And there's not enough years in our lifetimes to even learn it anywhere near all of it.
Exactly. So I love that we just dove into this for 40 minutes, because we're really just scratching the surface.
Yes.
But and there are many different perspectives. There's doctors and psychotherapists out there, and there's alternative folks like me. It really comes down to how a person is comfortable approaching it.
Absolutely.
And a lot of my work is, people have their own misconceptions about what hypnosis is, or maybe they didn't have a great experience with a different hypnotherapist. And so they're like, no, hypnosis, no. But it really comes down to the connection you have with your practitioner, and it's my honor and my pleasure to help a woman in their path. This is very, very important work to me, and I'm not a cookie cutter kind of coach. So that, this is one of the reasons why I'm on the earth.
Yes, this fulfills you. This is your purpose. This is one of your main purposes. This is your why. Why? Because you feel you're fulfilled. You want other women to not go through maybe some of the things you've gone through. You want women to come out better on the other side. I'm sure those successes that you see on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, there's not a better feeling in the world to you.
Yeah, it's thrilling. It's thrilling to watch a woman make that transformation, and to know that she deserves it, and that she's worth it, that she values herself. That's huge.
Yes.
That's huge.
So last question for you. Again, back to kind of what I said before. That makes sense. A lot of the NLP, and there's different approaches for every person, but generally speaking, someone that's listening right now, what's the lowest hanging fruit? What's the easiest thing, the path of least resistance, something that they can put into motion today to at least begin the turnaround process for themselves, mentally, emotionally, spiritually?
Sure, exactly. Well, I would decide what you want. What's your dream? What would make you the most happy? What lights you up? What kind of person would make your life better? What do you value? What are your values? And create your life from there. And focus on what you want. We have to reframe life every single day. Things are going to happen. We're going to run through these obstacles. Is that obstacle actually an opportunity for you? Absolutely. What's the opportunity there? And live your life from that place of constantly questioning and saying, what's good about this? Why now? Why do I want to deal with this now? Rather than kind of living on autopilot of, things are going to be okay. Yeah, I have to be positive. That's phoning it in. So you got to go deep down inside and ask yourself, what do I need? How do I want to live? What do I want my future to look like? And I can help a woman or anyone walk through that process of getting really crystal clear on what that is.
So basically, your current situation doesn't have to be your forever situation.
Exactly.
And if your current situation is causing you grief, heartburn, heartache, etc., on a regular basis, not the once in a while, but if this is become a routine and you feel like, oh my God, I'm on a constant loop. This is my life. This is it. No, this is not it, is what you're saying. Address it.
Yes.
And acknowledge it. And because the only way you can start turning things around is to at least look yourself in the mirror and be authentic and tell yourself the truth, like you've said several times.
Yes. Deep down, you have to know what the truth is. And you have to be willing to do anything to make your life better. You have to be willing to do the work.
Yeah.
You want to see results. If that's not important to you and you'd rather stay stuck in the story, then that's your life, and that's not the way everyone wants to live. But you got to decide, how much longer do I want to keep suffering?
Right.
What is this doing for me?
Yeah.
Is it serving a purpose to suffer, or would I rather have an investment in pleasure and joy and happiness and success?
I think this is fascinating stuff, Nicole, and I really appreciate you coming on to share it. And like you said, we've just scratched the surface. We can talk about this for hours and hours and hours and hours. We will link up your website and social media links in the show notes. Anyone wants to reach you, you can reach her through the links. And Nicole, all the best to you. We'll stay in touch.
Thank you so much, Nate. What a pleasure. Thank you.